Hello there.
Hi, friend. How are you?
I'm well, sis. How are you doing?
I'm so good. What an amazing event. I was just loving that last session, and I'm really so excited to be here with you today.
On days like this, I feel so blessed. I have to be the luckiest person on the planet. I get to spend time talking to amazing women like yourself. And yes, all the panels were just mind-blowingly good. And someone said, I feel like a fly on a very important wall. And that's exactly, I think, how all of us feel and how I feel every day. So without further ado, the yoga was great because we kept going. We're going into our fourth hour now. So figured folks might want to just be nice and relaxed for our chat because this is such an important conversation that we'll be having with you today, Safiya. So super excited. So let's see. Let me start. Not that you need an introduction, but I will start with all your accomplishments, not all of them, just a brief description, because if we had to do all of your accomplishments, it would take a very long time. But we will put
Also,
links.
it's torture to have to hear an intro, so please.
No, I'm happy.
Wife, mom, sister, friend. That seems good.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do it. And we'll put a link to your full bio in our chat as well. So Dr. Safiya Noble, who needs no introduction, is an internet studies scholar, and she's professor of gender studies and African American studies at the University of California, Los Angeles, where she serves as the co-founder and co-director of the UCLA Center for Critical Internet Inquiry. She holds affiliations in the School of Education and Information Studies. She is also a research associated at the Oxford Internet Institute at the University of Oxford, where she is a commissioner on the Oxford Commission on AI and Good Governance. In 2021, she was recognized as MacArthur Foundation Fellow, also known as the Genius Award, not surprising, for her groundbreaking work on algorithmic discrimination, which prompted her founding of a nonprofit equity engine to accelerate investment in companies, education, and networks driven by women of color. She's also the author of a best-selling book on racist and sexist algorithmic bias in commercial search engines called Algorithms of Oppression: How Search Engines Reinforce Racism, which has been widely reviewed in scholarly and popular publications. She's a recipient of the Hellman Fellowship and the UCLA Early Career Award. In 2022, she was recognized as the inaugural NAACP Archwell Digital Civil Rights Award recipient. Incredible. What an incredible life, what incredible achievements, and such well-deserved recognition of your talent.
Thank you. That's a nice thing. I feel like, just like you, I just get up every day and try to do work that makes a difference in the world. So it's really an honor to get to be with you, Mia, and this whole brilliant community that you've created for us.
Absolutely. You have a huge fan club here, so we're so happy to have you. One thing I do want to share with folks is I was supposed to do closing remarks, but we want to give you more time. So I'm going to skip my closing remarks. And I do want to share a personal anecdote with folks. So for those of you who don't know, I met Safiya for the first time at Oxford, where we had our in-person Women in AI Ethics event. It was our first one there. And Safiya and I started talking. This was the first time we had met. And I told her that I would love to get a video with her just to let my teenager know that her mom knows important people and her mom is really cool. And Safiya is, oh my God. Oh, I was so blown away by her generosity and just her thoughtfulness. She recorded a video for my teenager, telling my teenager how amazing I am. And debatable, but I'll take it. Thank you. How cool I am. And honestly, it was just so thoughtful. And I'm so grateful to this day because scored major points with my teenager. And if any of you were teenagers or have teenagers, that's a very, it's a very difficult audience.
It's hard to do, right? These teenagers are why do they hate us? I don't know. I feel like every mom, every parent out here deserves to have anybody that their teen thinks is cool, just go on and on about how great their parents are, because my own son is constantly telling me, Mom, what if one day people decide that your work on Google is wrong? And I'm like, oh, well, that's just never going to happen. And, but he finds me to be the most uncool person there is, because I shape the way he can engage with technology much more than his friends' parents do. And so he finds me to be incredibly uncool. In that way. So maybe Mia, I need you to make a video for him now. Just, just pay it forward. I don't
Oh my
know.
God, I would love to, but I think there are 1,000 people out there, more than thousands of
I know I
people.
need like LeBron James or somebody to do it, So
Oh,
so
I'd be
he'll
happy
listen.
to. I'd be honored to do it. And I'm sure there's like so many people out there just waiting for an opportunity to sing your praises.
Thank
But
you.
so there are so many questions I have for you, Safiya. This is like a conversation I've been still looking forward to. So let me just start with the one that's on top of mind for all of us. It feels like we are playing this constant game of whack-a-mole, right? Every day there's a new headline talking about some ethical transgression that some big tech has done or small company that VCs have funded has been up to. Yourself, Ifio Mazoma, and also Timnit Gebru have sounded the alarm on this, that how so much of the funding is being diverted to these technologies, which are built by white men for white men. How do we start redirecting those funds towards more ethical causes, more equitable causes, and especially technology that works for all of us?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those conversations that is, painful on most days, and I try to be optimistic on others. But I will say that it does feel like we're, some days it feels like we're losing in the way that probably climate scientists also feel that, we're losing. Because there are tremendously powerful people and companies, and of course, the tech industry being the most powerful industry on planet Earth. 7 of the 10 most well-capitalized companies in the world are tech companies. And certainly 10 years ago, when I was writing about algorithms and that the evidence was there in the study that I did about Google and search, really as a case study to try to say, well, this is just the beginning. Like, let's just make one example to show that algorithms or AI can be racist and sexist in its implementation, in its execution, and in its consequences for bolstering structural inequality. 10 years ago, when we made that argument, I made that argument in the book, in what became the book, Algorithms of Oppression. That was an illegible argument. I mean, most people, first of all, didn't even know what an algorithm was. It was not in our part of our daily lexicon the way it is now. Now the kids are like so clear on things like shadow banning and other types of algorithmic suppression and amplification and harm. We had this last decade of foundations and universities making tremendous investments in what I would argue were kind of like the wrong people at the most important moments of trying to sound the alarm about the harm. So here now we have, fast forward a decade, exactly as you said, Mia, headlines every day, every week, every month about, caste-based discrimination of Dalits in India, or amplification of white nationalists and white supremacy in the United States, or the use of technology to foment ethnic cleansing or genocide or religious suppression, or propaganda and the spread of lies that undermine modern liberal democracies. So we have all of this evidence that's now piling, and it's piling up so quickly, and the consequences are so grave that we don't have enough people working in these spaces, not only as journalists documenting and scholars doing research and companies trying to mitigate and develop harm. We actually have like more good money, I think, going after being kind of thrown after bad ideas. So it's true to me and Ifoma and, other Black women who work in this space, we often feel like it's been, as like you, Mia, the women of color, the women of conscience, LGBTQ, IA plus communities, journalists, scholars, community organizers, we've all been on the front lines of documenting the harm, talking about the harm. And we've done it, we've MacGyvered that, with very little resource relative to the bad actors in the space who want profit above people at all costs. And now I think we're at a time where, we may lose the really important moments that we need to call back and abolish some of the kinds of technologies that have been made with zero oversight, no public accountability, no government accountability. And that to me just seems like a daunting moment that we're in. Having said that, let me just say, like many of us, we come from communities who have experienced tremendous oppression for centuries, if not millennia. We know, you and I especially know, that to even be women of color from our communities who have a voice and have a little bit of influence, that is profound relative to our mothers and our grandmothers and our great grandmothers. So I do believe that a handful of people can make tremendous change, and we must, and we will. It would be great though if we could do that with greater resources and support. And I think we have to do that by kind of, like I said, MacGyvering ourselves together. And I see the impact of the work that your organization has done, that I've done, that our colleagues have been doing around the world, because now you have companies like Google and other companies fully acknowledging that there is a need for thinking about things like ethics or social accountability or responsibility. And we finally have policymakers talking about this and taking this very seriously, in particular in the United States, where we're way behind the EU. And so I think that when I look at the testimonies that go before these different bodies and that are circulating in the media, it's our work that's being taken up. So that's very, very heartening. And that makes me think that, there's a possibility for the kinds of change we want to see. But, our real challenge now is to not let these bad actors co-opt our work and our words and our frameworks and twist them into projects that are self-serving and in their interests. And of course, that's one of the things that I think we see happening quite a bit.
You're so right. It does get very disheartening. And when we started this talk today, this morning, and we started by we started with an exercise asking folks how they experienced or could relate to when other people are getting credit for the work, like other men are getting more funding for work that they have pioneered. And for you, especially, who's been at the forefront of so many of these issues, it must be even more so real. This is really kudos to you, everything that you've done to move this forward. I did have a question about the independence so there's funding, but then there's funding that comes with strings attached. So Alex Hanna wrote recently about there's a need for independent research, and the DARE Institute, also set up by Dr. Gebru and Alex Hanna and others, has also made tremendous strides in that direction. It's like, where do you see this? But we are seeing more and more AI researchers who are being pulled away by tech companies, right? They're the big paychecks, they have the more funding. Like, how do we get some sort of a balance there where people want to do good work, they want to do their research, they don't want to be just shilling for some company, for some tech company, but at the same time, there's the economic reality. How can you pay your bills? How do you send your kids to college? How do you pay the mortgage if you then stand up for your values? So maybe some real talk about what is your advice? How do women, especially women, non-binary folks, women of color, how do they balance both their personal needs versus what their community needs?
Yeah, it's a really great question because, for me, I will say when I was starting out as an assistant professor in the academy, of course, I did not make enough money to support our family, because when I look out and I see the landscape, it's women of color holding up whole communities. It's like yourself, your nuclear family, your in-laws, or extended family, right? And of course, it also costs us more to get our education. We're often more likely to go to less highly ranked schools and pay more money and student loans and all those kinds of things to get that education or experience, or we experience active career suppression. I certainly experienced that my entire career, being paid 60% of what my male counterparts made. So that has a compounding effect over the course of one's career. You have more responsibilities, you make less money, you have less opportunities, fewer opportunities. So we know that that's the reality. And I think one of the things that's been, in my career, what I tried to do was really fight for a space. I had to do things that created a lot of hardship on my family, like moving to different institutions and taking different jobs, and all of us moving, and that just being a disruption in order to find points of leverage to do things like get a research center at UCLA, the Center for Critical Internet Inquiry. I mean, that came about as part of a retention effort by UCLA to get me to stay. But I was forced to kind of go on leave for a couple of years to another institution to say, like, I'm not playing. If you don't support my work, I'm leaving. And, people in academia have to do that all the time. But of course, that costs us a lot personally to do those kind of moves. And not everybody can make those kinds of moves either. So I think we should be aware of like the texture and granularity of what it takes. And women in corporate America have these same kinds of experiences. You have to leave one job to get ahead, and that's disruptive to building. So these independent spaces of support are so important. And I really loved, to meet when she created DARE, I think was really clear about the need for kind of non-corporate funded space to do research. In academia, for us, like at the Center for Critical Internet Inquiry, we don't take any tech money. Now, can you imagine? I mean, in universities now that are mostly held hostage to declining state budgets and taxpayer investments, they are heavily reliant upon industry to keep universities going around the country. And this is really, shameful. I mean, if the public really understood the degree of capture, I mean, we want universities to be freer spaces than that, right? So, not taking corporate money has meant then that we aren't as well funded. But what we have been able to do with the foundation funding and, gift funds that have come has been to support people who are under-supported. And this to me is where I look out and I see people doing amazing work, but they're out here doing that work and they don't have healthcare. So who can we hire into our university to support their work so they have healthcare also, so they can do their work? How do we get foundations to give more kind of unrestricted funding that isn't tied to some very narrowly framed initiative or work or agenda, mostly that gets set by, let's say, people that we're actually arguing against in our research, right? I mean, so it's like if Harvard is setting the agenda, but we're saying, well, listen, the model that Harvard has taken has been deeply exclusionary. We wanted to do the work that's about vulnerable people, people who are under supported, people who are in the margins. Don't constrain us with your funding around other people's kind of frameworks, these return on investment kind of models. What we need is for people to be supported to do their work. And I think that has been a really important press that I have made coming from academia, very similar to what Alex is saying, that we can't have massive corporatized research agendas funding independent scholars or thinkers or community organizers. We also can't have super restrictive foundation parameters. At the end of the day, there is more to it also in the work that we do, I think, that's not just like pointing out the harm, pointing out where the discrimination happens, pointing out where the human, civil, and sovereign rights are violated. That's really important. But we also cannot give up our joy. We cannot give up our feeling of freedom, our sense that we are on this earth to do more than just be the cleanup crew for everybody else's BS. We are not the maids of the world to clean up all the messes. We also deserve to have a high quality of life and experiences of like living out our full agency. And that is also not the model of funders. They actually don't care. That's so extractive. And so we push back very hard on that. And we've been able to do things like hire an artist in residence and just see our Black feminist art change the world by supporting her, right? And remind us of our resilience and our beauty and our lineage and our possibilities. And I think that that's a really important dimension of the work and the like energy that women of color bring in this space. And that's like the part I'm not willing to give up.
Thank you so much for saying that. It's been so challenging for folks who are joining us for the first time who may not know. Women in AI Ethics has been self-funded by myself for many years, since we started. This year, we got funding from the Omidyar Network and Ford Foundation, who joined us this morning because they see the value in the work we're doing, the value in lifting up diverse voices and creating the safe space where they feel like this is not just AI, it's not just a white Michelle Chavin said this morning, like pale male engineers, right? This is for all of us, and we deserve a spot. We deserve full inclusion, full representation, and we deserve to be heard. So kudos to you for not taking tech money. That is so incredibly hard to do because we realize that ourselves because we don't. And we are actively trying to find different ways to fund our work. And I so totally empathize. And your work is at a bigger scale. So I can completely empathize how hard that is. What you said about joy, it's so challenging that the people who have the least are expected to do the most. And like you said, we are just holding up, like it's women, right? Especially Black women of color who are holding up this entire world. And it falls to us it shouldn't fall to us to be fixing all of this. So where are you seeing these pockets where you're getting support? Who are the organizations? Who are the people? Because it's one thing, we know what the harms are, we know the people, we know the companies causing the harms, but there are also people out there actively fighting these harms who are able to support us. So where are you seeing those pockets of like funders or people, supporters?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Ford and Omidyar because I have found them to be amazing, amazing partners with us. Ford has been we have an incredible program officers, Lori McGlinchey and Chance Williams, who are they're just deeply committed to equity, and they are relentless about it. And they understand this conversation. I mean, they could replace us in this conversation, quite frankly. They're so attuned to letting us do our work and not kind of like over directing it. So I have been really grateful. They've taught me a lot about what funders can be like, what program officers can be like. And so I'm really grateful for the two of them, and for, their teams. Ania Williams at the Omidyar Foundation has been incredible. I think she's also incredibly visionary. She's a person herself who's been harmed in the tech sector in her own kind of like history. And she's an incredibly visionary and forward-thinking person. And she also is, I think, attempting to hold up a lot of people. And what I see over and over is this model, and we do it also at C2I2 at UCLA, where if we have enough of resource, we can kind of re-grant and support other people and build a stronger network, so that also we don't live in this kind of like cult of personality around specific people, which I fully reject. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I struggle with even like getting awards and things like this, because I feel like I'm part of a community, and this community, professionally and personally, all of us need to be held up so that no one node is more important than another. And that actually is really like a very valuable way of working. So, certainly, I will just say, one thing about MacArthur and having won the MacArthur Fellowship, that has, of course, transformed my family. Like, the first thing I did was pay off my student loans. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just like that kind of practical level of support, because most of the funding that we also all get into our organizations, we can't spend to like take care of our families. Like, it doesn't, it goes like into your research budget at the university, and you have to like give like super tight parameters around spending that. So gifts like that are transformative for helping a person secure themselves. Like, for me, I've had a number of health things that I've been working on, and that this affords me the ability to like take care of my health in a different way than I could before. The SSRC has this new Just Tech Fellowship, and I think those fellows are going to be announced any day now. And one of the things about that model is they, for example, called in all of the Black scholars who work like in this space of like tech criticism, and like who are really taking on like surveillance technologies, like predictive policing, like all the hardest things that are underfunded and undersupported. And they said, what are the things that would make a difference? And of course, the things we said, well, we need childcare. Or, at the time that they were asking me about it, I was not tenured yet. And I said, well, I have a young child, and I need my child to be with me if I'm gone for more than a couple of days. And I remembered, for example, the early days when he was a baby, and I needed him to travel with me that first year because I was breastfeeding. And so I couldn't go anywhere unless he went with me, because it was like not easy. And the world makes it impossible for women to talk about things like that. Like, I'm breastfeeding and I need to have another ticket for someone to help me while I'm, going and doing my work. And the universities, of course, or our jobs don't pay for that kind of thing. So these kinds of gifts and levels of support that SRC and MacArthur and those kinds of Carnegie, for example, those really help you to do the real things, pay for elder care, whatever the things are that you need in your life. I think that's the model that more funders should be looking at, because scholars of color, again, if you're not a heterosexual or married person with a partner who can like hold it down, you might actually hold you down or hold you up. I mean, for me, I was very lucky because I have an extremely supportive husband who holds it down at home so I can have this career. But, I think, what if I didn't have him? I would have to pay for or corral help, I would not have had the career I've had. And so we need support for like the whole person in the whole context within which they live. And that might be healthcare, you know, secure housing, all those kinds of things, health. So those are some of the places and spaces and models that I'm seeing here recently. The thing that I think is the most challenging, though, is that we are living in a time where billionaires are actually setting the agenda, even through like newer family foundations that are supporting. So of course we had tremendous support from the Minderoo Foundation. That's what helped us start our center at UCLA. But you know, as things change in these kind of family-based foundations, you know, you're always trying to figure out how to be attentive, and especially when you're talking about international relationships and they have different models and ways of thinking about like their own theories of change, always trying to like stay attuned and connected to those things. I mean, that's part of the dance I think that you have to do when you don't have like a for-profit engine fueling your work.
I'm so glad that you mentioned it's such key issues that often get overlooked. Like you said, childcare. I feel like we live in a country where there are powers that be that just believe the children just magically grow up. The way they just dismiss the work that it takes to bear a child, to take care of a child and have the child thrive, and totally discount the role that the parent, that the mother plays. It is just, it's abhorrent on so many levels. That so I'm glad that through your representation and your speaking up that we are getting more of those models, because it's not enough to fund the work. You have to fund what makes the work possible. And also credit to your family, your spouse, and for making it possible so we could have you and we could have more of you, because that is so critical, having that network and that community, because that's something I personally struggled with being new to this country as an immigrant. You don't have the support network. And I noticed it makes a huge difference in your success. So I love this new model, what you're pushing for, you're creating, because it's going to help the rest of us, because you're lifting up other women also who are facing the same challenges. I just looking at some of the comments, amazing. So if folks have any questions, please pop them into the Q&A. We will spend another, I know everyone has a lot of questions for you, so we'll pop them into a Q&A and we'll take them one at a time. So just one last question before we jump in there, because this could be a very long conversation, and you know how much I love our conversations. So tell us more about your equity engine. Like, what is the vision? What is the plan? Would love for our audience to hear more about it.
Okay. So I had a couple of experiences that really helped inform this idea of like, what is it that we need? You know, first I was in a conversation with some very powerful people. I was, like many of us on this call, I was the only Black woman in the room, or I was the only woman of color, you know, that was kind of oriented the way I am, the way we are in this conversation. And of course, we're like trying to talk about the tech sector and like holding it accountable for the harm it's done in society. And I said in the meeting, I said, you know, there's something wrong with the model where men can be given all the money, all the time, and all the runway. You know, they go into the woods in San Francisco and they dream up a world that they want the rest of us to experience. And then they're given unlimited resources. And actually, when they fail up and they get more and more opportunity, even though they don't have a strong track record of success. If they are breaking laws around the world, they're causing harm, they get more investors and more investors, like the illogic of this. And I said, what if women of color were given the time, the money, the runway for us to bring our dreams of how the world could exist into reality? Like, no, there's no venture capital model for that. And what if the return wasn't just cash payouts to shareholders, but it was higher quality of life, a better environment, everybody's educated, there's a high degree of well-being and, love. Like, those are some of the things we want to work on. Of course, we also want cash money, but like, we want more than that too. We want to use that money in service of different kinds of values. And that is what was really the thing that had me first thinking, we need an organization that is a runway generating organization for women of color to bring their dreams into existence. So that was like the first thing. And then the second conversation was, the Biden administration came into power, and I, got some calls from DC asking me would I come and take a job in the federal government working on what we work on, a tech accountability. And after all the kind of going through all of the vetting and, processes, I realized like it was actually impossible for me to go and be in service to this country, because I would have to, basically, I could never talk about my book. I was precluded from any kind of outside speaking. I was basically going to take a pay cut. It was going to be impossible. All the people that I was holding up, I would not be able to hold up anymore. And I was like, oh, this is why the government is run by 25-year-olds who can live on $40,000 a year, who actually can't, but live like 4 people in an apartment in DC, or millionaires who fund themselves and don't need a government salary. And I was like, well, this is ridiculous too. Like, there are people we need to go into service who maybe their mortgage needs to be paid for a couple of years so they can do that work. And so my dream is to raise like $100 million fund that can be invested differently. Of course, we will invest in women and their great business ideas, and that will help bring a return to the fund. But we need like $100 million so that when Mia Dan wants to scale up this organization to the next level of impact, there's runway for you to do that. And that, is, I'm speaking it into existence. We've had a very, very small gift so far, but I do believe that if we declare that we need this, we will generate it and we'll make it, and it needs to exist. And every time I ask successful women of color who want to scale to the next level, is there any resource like this for them? They're like, there's nothing. Because I think the expectation is if you're a successful woman, you got it. But see, when you want to pivot or scale, you don't got it. We don't have it. And I think that keeps us from taking bigger risks and stepping out into different kinds of opportunities of leadership, because we don't have the resources or the safety net under us. So I want this to be an engine that drives more equity in the space, not just more shareholder returns. So if anyone is listening and you want to give, please give or be in touch, because I think, people could be doing things like transferring wealth. This is a great opportunity for us to think about how does wealth transfer happen? I was speaking last summer to a group of white women and Jewish women who were extremely wealthy. And I said, all of them were talking about their inherited wealth. And I said, if you want to make a real difference in the world, you should be transferring your wealth into the hands of Black women and women of color, because we're actually out here doing hella work. And it had never occurred to them that they should do that. And so this is also an opportunity, I think, to have an organization where people can make bequests and they can leave resources and help do that work of funding, people who are doing things they're not doing.
I'm just so energized by your energy and your passion. Oh my God, Safiya, this is like, I wish I could bottle this up somewhere. And what you said about just, I hope everything you said comes true from your, how did they say this phrase, isn't there? From your mouth to God's ears.
Yes.
And I hope
it's for us too, that's the thing too. I think that the industry and the world we live in capitalism, orients us toward singular success. And I don't think that's actually the ethos of many people, many communities around the world, right? I think the ethos is like the ethos we have, which is we meet and we start thinking like, how do we support each other? That's actually one of the things I love the most about being a Black woman is that that's how we roll. If we got $20, we pass that same $20 back and forth between us for 2 years until somebody gets on their feet and it gets it right. I mean, that's how me and my girlfriends have been our whole lives. And so I think that ethos is like powerful, and we should be able to like scale that kind of ethos. And that's actually the kind of ethos the world needs.
I love it. I feel like so much of the work that we do and the way we thrive is through solidarity and generosity of spirit. And we're always being there for each other and lifting each other up. So I love this idea of mutual aid. I love this idea of having a safety net for women doing the work. And I just love the fact that you were here to share that with us. And it's just incredibly inspiring to hear about all the work that you've done, all the work you're doing. And yes, if anybody's out there who's looking to find amazing work, and I hope they find their way to you, because the world needs more of you. Safiya, thank you.
And more of you.
So much. We only have 5 more minutes, so just to be respectful of everybody's time, so we will have to skip Q&A. How can people get in touch with you, Safiya? What's the best way to reach you?
Yes, okay, I'll try to drop this in the chat too, but of course I'm always on Twitter if you're looking to like just know about research and news and things that are breaking in our space that we should be concerned about. It's a little bit of a bad news feed, but it is really important because I think it's like when people are trying to join into this conversation at the intersection of rights and society and dignity, they're there. Of course, thank you so much. All the things that have been put into the chat, Susanna is on it. These are all the places where you can find me. And I'm probably the least on LinkedIn. So I know this is probably a big LinkedIn crew, so I'll just put like 100 billion women in the subject. So I know it's you and I can prioritize getting back to you. But, please, I think we have so much opportunity before us. And listen, the one thing I'll say just before I close is just, even though it feels overwhelming and like these challenges that we have in all of our various different types of work, those of us who are here on this call in industry and academia and nonprofits, we want to remember that, during the time of abolition, when people were actively working to end things like the transatlantic slave trade or the institution of slavery, it was such a small handful of people that were really doing that work relative to the whole population. My mom always tells me, she would always say, everybody said after the fact that they marched with Dr. King, but they didn't. In fact, they were afraid, and it was just a small handful of people who did that movement work. And I think we are part of a movement, and we are part of that small group of people who are raising the consciousness about the stakes of what happens when we flatten our humanity, we lose our humanity to the machines. Where automated decision-making becomes so ubiquitous that we lose a chance at having chances and transforming and growing and developing. We are those people. So we need to be heartened and remember that a small group of people make a huge difference for millions of people who may never even know what we're working on. And so I want everyone to stay energized, and I stay energized with you, knowing that you all are doing your work and I'm doing my work, and we're connected, and we will be the difference.
What an incredibly powerful, inspiring note to end our summit on. I appreciate you so much. Everything that you're doing is making such a huge difference. And yes, there are so many women and non-binary folks who are just ready to sign up for this movement. And we are all going to be part of this AI revolution. So Safiya, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Love you. Thank you all. Appreciate you.
Bye.